Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. We're expecting a few more people, and so we'll give folks a moment to get in, get settled, and we'll start in just a moment. While we're waiting for folks to join us, if you could, if you're here, share with us in the chat your name, what school or district you're from, and what brings you here today. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. We have a few more folks who might be joining us, but they can jump in when they get here. So good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Callie Cornell with the Center for Collaborative Education. And today we are so excited to introduce many of you to the Innovation Pathways Network and share information about Innovation Pathways programming. So we recognize that this continues to be a really difficult climate and a very tough and unique year. And this week in particular seems to be a really incredibly busy one given the school year winding down. And so we are so grateful that so many of you have made the time to be here today. If you haven't already, we invite you to say hello and welcome. So in the chat, if you could put your name, your school and district, and what brings you here today. We've got folks, I'm taking a quick look at the chat here. We've got folks from all over. So good morning. Thanks for being here. We have a few housekeeping pieces to just cover before we dive in. We are recording this workshop, and so we'll post this afterwards for you to be able to review. We do also have a closed captioning option. We had some glitches before we started, sort of course, like technology glitches happen just as you're starting at your live events. We're working on it. If you don't already, you should shortly see in the top left-hand corner of your Zoom screen a red button that says live, and you can click that down arrow and pop up an optional web browser to view the closed captionings in real time. If we're not able to get that up and running this morning, we will send a transcript afterwards for you to be able to review. And so a quick sort of round of introductions. Here's the Innovation Pathways team. I'm Callie Cornell, Innovation Pathways Consultant with the Center for Collaborative Education. I'm joined by our colleagues at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We have Jennifer Glotkin, Elizabeth Bennett, and David Baird. And from CCE, while not everyone's here on the workshop with us today, our full team consists of Executive Director Oscar Santos. You'll hear from my colleague Laura Toda shortly. And also of note, so not on the screen here, but joining us, our colleague Allison is here to help with facilitation and support some of our tech needs this morning. So please make sure to reach out to Allison in the chat if you run into any issues. She currently is listed as the host, so you can communicate directly with the host if you have any tech support that you need as we go through the morning this morning. For those of you who are unfamiliar with CCE, we are a local Boston-based organization whose mission is to transform schools to ensure that all students succeed. We have a focus on increasing equity and reducing systemic racism, and CCE is partnering with the Massachusetts Department of Education to provide technical assistance to both existing Innovation Pathways designees, as well as those who are in the pipeline to apply for designation. So all of you who are on the call here today. We have hosted a number of events this year, including workshops, webinars, program spotlights, professional learning communities, all to support the sharing of ideas and connections across the Innovation Pathways programs. We're going to try to cover a lot of information in a very short amount of time this morning. And so you'll get access to the slide deck and all of the resources we talk about afterwards, but all of the resources today can be accessed through our community of practice website, where we house resources from the Toolkit, which we'll talk a little bit more about in just a moment. You can register for upcoming events. So we don't have any over the summer, but there certainly will be some as we move into the fall. And it's also where we house all of the materials from past events. So you can head to that website to check out all of the information that we share today, that we've shared in the past. It's all accessible to you. And so I think one of my colleagues could share that link in the chat. So today we're excited to have you here, and our goals are really threefold. The first is understanding the basics of Innovation Pathways. including the guiding principles, the core characteristics, part A and B, application components and processes. We want to build a deeper understanding of Innovation Pathways experience with support from current educators and students. And so we're so excited to have a panel of educators who have gone through the design, implementation, and application process to share their information and insight with you. We also have a group of students who are here to share their current experience in their pathway with you. So thanks to all of our presenters for being here, and excited to get into those portions of the workshop. And as is always the goal for each of our events, we hope to build connections across the Innovation Pathways network, and in this case, the prospective applicant network for those applying or planning to apply in the upcoming school year. So with those goals in mind, our agenda begins with some introductions and connections. We'll jump right into sharing information about Innovation Pathways just after that. Following that, we'll hear from 3 educators who are leading and supporting current Innovation Pathway programs. We're also fortunate to have those 3 students with us to share information about their particular pathway programs. And those students are from 3 different high schools across Massachusetts to share what their experience as a student in a pathway program has been like. You'll get a chance to reflect on what you hear from our presenters and engage with students and the educators on our panel in a Q&A in a small breakout space. And then sort of as we wrap up our time in our last few minutes, we'll go over logistics of the application process, timeline, some financial support that might be available, and ongoing support for you and your school teams. And that will take us to the end of our time this morning. So as has become a practice for us, we want to acknowledge that these are certainly not ordinary times. Virtual teaching, virtual learning, and virtual working is a stressor for all of us in many different ways. And this particular cartoon states, okay, kids, don't bug mommy when she's in her remote working cubicle. And I think many of us feel like they might be able to relate, whether it's children or pets or spouses, that remote working can pose lots of challenges. So we share this as just a reminder that remote teaching and professional learning requires us all to be flexible and understanding. There are distractions and interruptions from email inboxes, partners, children, pets, technology glitches. So we recognize that those can and will happen, and hope that you'll be patient with us, we'll be patient with you as we engage together in this professional learning. So with that, we want to jump into some connections. We like to make these events as interactive as possible. And we want to begin with a quick connections activity to get to know who's here, who's in the room. And we'd love for you to let us know about your current experience with Innovation Pathways. So my colleague will launch the poll. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen in just a moment, and let us know what's your current level of familiarity with or experience with Innovation Pathways. Are you a current designee? Are you continuing work on a pathway design application that was started in the past? Are you new and in the very early stages? Or are you just here to learn more and hear about no plans to seek designation, but just here to learn? Or are you others? There's some other role that you're playing or experience you have with Innovation Pathways. So I'll give you a moment to select your answer, submit your answer, and we'll check in on those poll results in just a moment. Looks like answers might be winding down, and we've got, we'll end the poll here. We'll give you 30 seconds or we'll end the poll there. Thanks so much, Allison. So it looks like our front runners here are folks who are new to the application process in the early stages of planning for one or more pathway programs. And then in close second, we have some current Innovation Pathways designees who are applying, I would suspect, for a second pathway or a third pathway designation, and a few folks who are currently not seeking designation, just here to learn more. So thanks to all for being here. We're happy to have you. And so I will say that our first section, we're going to share a little bit of this sort of like 101 basics. So it might be repeat information for some of you, but good information for those who are new to Innovation Pathways. So what are Innovation Pathways? Some of you have been with us now for about 10 minutes and you're wondering, like, what are they? So Innovation Pathways are state designated programs that connect student learning to in-demand broad industry sectors and guide participating students to relevant post-secondary education and training. The program is really designed to provide students with coursework and experiences in high demand industry and are designed to create strong partnerships with employers in order to expose students to career options and help them develop the knowledge and skills related to a chosen field of study while they're in high school. Participation in this kind of pathway really contextualizes student learning. It engages students in their high school experience and can lead to student opportunities for meaningful careers in relevant industry sectors upon completion of high school, post-secondary education, and training. Excuse me. And most importantly, innovation pathway programs are designed to increase equitable access by eliminating barriers to student participation so that all students have the opportunity to enroll, participate, engage, and successfully complete a pathway experience. Schools, districts, and other entities apply for designation in one or more pathway areas, and our team is here to support you through the application and early implementation process. Our current landscape. So currently we have 121 approved programs as of just a couple months ago, with 22 new programs being approved this spring. And so we have those programs in 49 schools across 43 districts. And this fall, we're really excited that about 4,000 students at minimum will be part of Innovation Pathways programming across the state of Massachusetts. And so the full list of designees is available on the Massachusetts Department of Education website, and we'll make sure to drop that link as we go through our workshop this morning. So you'll see that link in a few different ways and capacities throughout the morning. There are 5 broad industry sectors that pathway programming fall under, and those are advanced manufacturing, environmental and life sciences, information, healthcare and social assistance, and business and finance. The designated programs must have a program that's aligned to one of these industry sectors. And here's a quick breakdown of the current designations awarded by sector. So as you can see, we've got healthcare and social assistance in the lead with 30 approved programs across the state, and closely behind manufacturing and information. We're also really excited to share that 15 of the 16 MassHire local workforce boards are active innovation partners, innovation pathway partners as of this spring. And I think we might have a few MassHire folks on the call today. Here we have our 5 guiding principles for innovation pathways. The guiding principles provide a framework for innovation pathways programs, and all of the programs are rooted in these 5 guiding principles. The first guiding principle is equitable access, meaning designated programs prioritize students underrepresented in education enrollment and completion, and innovation pathway programs should be structured in a way to eliminate barriers to student participation. The next guiding principle, guided academic pathways. Under this principle, programs are structured around clear and detailed student academic pathways in terms of coursework, course sequencing, and experiences beyond the classroom. Students should be exposed to authentic experience, academic rigor, and substantive career opportunities, allowing them to make informed decisions about career pathways to pursue. Under enhanced student supports, programs must demonstrate sufficient wraparound services to promote student success. So this includes ways to identify potential academic and non-academic challenges for enrolled students. The fourth guiding principle is connection to career, where programs expose students to targeted opportunities intended to lead to careers. This targeted exposure can come in the form of opportunities for workforce and career skills development, career counseling, and work-based learning. And then finally, there's effective partnership, the effective partnerships guiding principle, which requires a formal partnership between a school or district and MassHire, your local workforce board development partner, along with one or more employer partners. These guiding principles are organized throughout all of our processes. So the application process, planning tools, and other materials, many of them are organized around these guiding principles. We also have a set of core characteristics as part of innovation pathways. These characteristics are also required in order to receive innovation pathways designation, and they help fulfill those guiding principles. Massachusetts recognizes that these 6 core characteristics, when integrated into a coherent set of strategies and services for students, work towards ensuring high quality pathway programming for all students. Over the next several slides, I'll provide just a quick brief overview of the core characteristics. Of note, I'm going to run quickly through them. And so another reminder that you'll get these slides afterwards and you'll have access to this information. So under the core characteristic of advising, there's an expectation that well-designed college and career advising is an embedded part of the pathway experience for every single student, and that this advising ultimately supports students in developing a clear understanding of post-secondary options and courses of study that are available to them, including higher education, training, and career options. It requires that students have an individual learning plan, which is the MyCap in Massachusetts, which many of you might already be familiar with. The second core characteristic, labor market demand. So this requires that programs are aligned to labor market demands in their local region and across the state. And when designing programs and applying for designation, programs have to demonstrate that there's a current or projected labor market demand for skilled employers in the chosen workforce sector of the pathway program in which they're applying for designation. Under integrated instruction, here, students participate in a carefully designed sequence of integrated, rigorous instructional courses relevant to their pathway. And that includes both academic and technical subjects. Work-based learning. So the next core characteristic, pathway programs all include components of work-based learning. There's a structured work readiness exploration and engagement activities and work-based learning experiences that are essential components of every pathway program. This is comprised of a 100-hour internship or capstone experience that's aligned to the pathway industry sector. And then finally, sort of our last two characteristics of credential preparation. So this means that the pathway enables students to make progress towards attainment of an industry recognized credential or college credit towards a certificate, associate's, or bachelor's degree while they're still in high school. And then finally, strong post-secondary linkages. And this means that students participate in a wide range of college awareness and engagement activities to inform their post-secondary plans relating to college, apprenticeship, higher education training programs. And so what does this actually mean for students, and what kinds of experiences do all students have if they participate in Innovation Pathways programs? All students take a minimum of 4 courses as part of their pathway program, 2 that are technical and connected to building skills and knowledge within the industry sector, and 2 that are advanced. So these can be dual enrollment, AP, International Baccalaureate, or other courses that offer industry certification or college credit. There is an academic, career, and interest-based advising and counseling component for students in Innovation Pathways, including that each student has an individually documented plan to support their future planning through the use of MyCap. Excuse me. So for every Innovation Pathway program, there's also a strong industry presence and connection whereby students are engaging in work-based learning, either through an internship or a culminating capstone experience that's a minimum of 100 hours. And then finally, all students are still required to complete the Mass Core by graduation. So though these are common elements of every program, each Innovation Pathway program at every school has different elements based on their context, connections, and local community assets that make each program really unique. Before I move on to the next section, I want to pause for questions. So I've shared a lot of information very quickly. I'll ask what clarifying questions might you have about what I've just shared. Feel free to put that in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask verbally. And I'll ask my colleagues, since I'm sharing screen, I'm not able to see the chat. If anything's come up, if you could let me know.
Just one question. It was from Michelle from Boston Public Schools. She asked if Project Lead the Way is still allowed as advanced coursework, and the answer to that is yes. Oh, Chetna, I think you have a question. You're from Codman.
Thank you so much. I wanted to, first of all, I'm so excited to be part of it, and we can't wait to plan our application. I'm learning so much and taking a ton of notes, but and I think it may come in your, as the workshop evolves, how we will do this, but I'm hoping that all the good things in the detail will come forward about who instructs, how these courses are actually implemented. that's what I wanted to just ask, was that I'm hoping that some of the details of how schools that already have a, every school has its own style and set curriculum and everything. How do we embed something like this in a regular curriculum of school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I'll share a couple things. So we won't get into sort of those nitty gritty details today. We just quite frankly don't have the time.
Right.
But what we do hope is that by having today our educators here on a panel that you'll hear from shortly, and by having our students here, we'll start to get into some of those, and you'll have some dedicated time, both in small group and as a full group later in the workshop, to ask some questions if you have specific questions about some of those details, to ask our students or educators that are here joining us. I'll also share that all of those questions you posed are exactly the right questions for our ongoing technical assistance that we provide. So throughout the school year, we'll provide workshops, webinars, what we call program spotlights. So in lieu of site visits, we're not able to get in person. We've been doing virtual program spotlights. We have ongoing professional learning communities that meet. And so the questions that you're asking are really a great time for any of those events to dig into some of those details throughout the year. And
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add anything to that.
No, I would also encourage you to visit our community practice site that we linked earlier. It has frequently asked questions, lots of other resources, really a treasure trove of stuff for you to explore. So I'll again link that in the chat, and yeah, we'll look forward to meeting with you one-on-one and in those smaller groups as Kelly just referenced.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Of course. All right, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move us on, but if you have questions, jot them down, put them in the chat. We'll have plenty of time later today to come back to answer questions. So we sort of briefly mentioned this, but as you start planning to submit your Part A applications, the Innovation Pathways Toolkit is there as a resource for you. So it includes processes, tools, materials, examples related to essential components of pathway program design. So these processes, tools, and resources within the toolkit are certainly not exhaustive, nor is it intended that Innovation Pathways design and implementation teams necessarily make use of every single resource that's shared, but rather the resources shared are intended to support a variety of design, development, and implementation needs in a way that's customizable according to each school and your particular pathway's context. So my colleagues are going to drop the link in the chat there. So as Jennifer just mentioned, the Innovation Pathways Community of Practice Technical Assistance website is accessible to you at all times. And so the toolkit is there and lots of other information is there. And so the next couple of slides will share just some overview information about the toolkit and some particular resources we think will be helpful at this stage in the process. But know that there's a lot more information there for you to engage with and explore as you're beginning your planning and designing processes. So the Innovation Pathways Toolkit is organized into 4 sections to best support your use. So it includes an overview section that outlines the context of innovation pathways in the state of Massachusetts, and also includes the introductory information about the guiding principles. You can read more on that, and references the full criteria requirements from DESE for application. Section 2 provides resources, guides, and tools that have been published through DESE or in support of DESE around the planning and design required elements for pathway programs. And so those are DESE specific resources to support your planning and design. In section 3, we have provided a recommended 4-part cyclical process for thinking about designing and ultimately implementing your innovation pathways programs, with accompanying tools under each part of the design process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that design process in just a moment. And then finally, in section 4, it includes a variety of local and national templates, protocols, and tools. It includes examples and materials from other Massachusetts Innovation Pathways schools. And we hope that as we work with you over the coming years, we're able to add many more tools and materials that you build and share as part of the Innovation Pathways community of practice. So here's that 4-part design cycle that I just mentioned. So this was designed with an intent to guide school teams through a process of pathway development. And as we see, it has a 4-part cycle. And although the phases and steps are numbered, they are rarely approached sort of simply in chronological order. So often multiple steps occur simultaneously. Sometimes steps have to be retraced in order for the overall pathway to be successful. However, the phases and steps as they're listed in this section of the toolkit are there in order to serve as a logical reference for teams who are engaging in pathway design and development. In particular, we want to highlight the designing and planning phase, which is where we imagine many of you all are at the moment. And so under this design and planning phase, this is where your team will brainstorm, map, and assess your existing college and career readiness policies, programs, and practices. Here we recommend that planning teams take time to dive deeply to understand the knowledge, skills, and competencies that students should know and be able to do and demonstrate for specific industry sectors. This phase is also where you'll develop an action plan that includes specific tasks, decisions, and timelines. And so on the next slide, we're going to share 2 specific resources we want to call out and make you aware of that we think will be particularly helpful given where we know many of you are in the process. So the first tool to share is the criteria planning tools. So my colleagues will pop the link directly to this tool in the chat, but this particular tool was developed as a planning tool intended to support school teams that are applying for Innovation Pathways designation. So it's arranged by guiding principles, those 5 guiding principles we mentioned just a few moments ago, and lists each individual indicator that applicants are responsible for addressing in their Part A application. So essentially, this can act as your checklist document to ensure that you have all of the components of the application that you'll need. And it can be pulled out with a team in planning meetings to check in on where you are with each indicator and application requirement. It can also serve as a tool to sort of self-evaluate your readiness to apply for designation. So under each guiding principle within this document, there's a table that lists each individual indicator that's necessary for you to address in the design of your pathway program, and then subsequently as part of your Part A application. There's a place to indicate if you've not started, whether it's in process or it's complete. And then it also is a place for you to reflect on tasks, action items, and any next steps related to particular guiding principles. So when you open this document, it looks lengthy, but really it's designed to help you make sure you haven't missed any necessary components in your planning process for the Part A application. It's also worth noting that the same tool exists for Part B applications, and that tool is aptly named the Part B criteria planning tool. So both of those tools are available to you to help support sort of wading through the application process and the components that you'll need to have in place for application. The second resource we want to share and make you aware of is the Innovation Pathways Self-Assessment site tool. And so rather than being a checklist like the previous tool, this tool was created to allow planning teams to self-evaluate, self-assess where you are in your program design. So this document is also organized by the 5 guiding principles, and under each guiding principle, the tool asks you to self-assess on where you feel you are either initiating practice, developing your practice, or have established and sustained practice within that area. It provides short descriptions of each to use as a benchmark for your assessment. And this tool also provides a place to list evidence of your particular rating and sort of detail any key challenges or proposed next steps. This tool can be really helpful to use as a baseline and then a periodic assessment to track where you are in your progress and improvement of the pathway program over time. So we recommend using this tool with your planning team and your implementation team, where either you evaluate as individuals and compare results and have a discussion about that, or you use the tool to come to consensus as a team about where you are in your self-ratings. So those 2 tools in particular, we think will be really helpful at the beginning stages. But as we said, within the Innovation Pathways Toolkit, there's lots of information there to help support you. And then very quickly, the last section of the toolkit is where you'll find templates, protocols, tools, and other materials. So we've organized this into subsections to make it easier to find and explore the resources that you need. So there are 10, I think we added one more, so 11 subsections to the resource to help find materials from local partners, national organizations, and some school-specific examples from other Innovation Pathways schools. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Laura to bring us into our educator panel.
Thank you so much, Callie. We can go to the next slide, please. We are very excited to offer the opportunity to hear from 3 different educators who have part of pathway experiences in their settings. The way this panel will work is we're going to provide about 4 minutes for each educator to share about their experience and lessons learned, particularly in the planning and early implementation process of the pathways experience. And then as time allows, we're going to leave a little bit of space for some Q&A specifically for our educators. But I'll also just flag here that if you get a lot of questions coming in, don't worry. These educators are going to join us in our breakout spaces after this panel. So there will be ample opportunity to ask questions. So I encourage you, jot them down as you're thinking of questions. Feel free to populate them in the chat as we go along as well. And then we'll formally open up for a Q&A after we hear from our panelists. So without further ado, I would like to properly introduce each of them. So first we have with us Kristen Almquist, who is the Director of Early College and Career Pathways at Dearborn STEM Academy. Kristen has been an urban educator in the Boston area for over 15 years and has built 6 different career-themed pathways and 2 designated early college programs. Kristen's ultimate goal is to prepare underrepresented students for college and career, and most importantly, for students to be able to earn a family-sustaining wage in the Boston area upon graduation. Next, we have with us Mallory G. Noel, who's the Career Education Specialist at Norwood High School. In this role, she's facilitated the development of career education programming, career pathways, and provided practical application to the mandate, college, career, and life ready. She's passionate about helping students discover their why and how they can use high school as a launching point to achieve it. And finally, we have with us Meredith Cargill-Erickson, who has served as the Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Technology for the past 9 years, coming from both central office and principal experiences out of state. As a chief child advocate, Meredith focuses her work on building the capacity of leaders and teachers in her district to provide relevant and applicable learning experiences that empower each learner. I feel like that alone is very exciting for knowing that we're going to have an opportunity to hear from each of them. And we will give each of our educators those 4 minutes. And I propose we go in the order we have listed here in the slide. So I would love to pass the mic over to Kristen to share a little bit with us about your learnings and experiences in early planning and implementation.
Hey everybody, it's great to be here. Super excited to share our pathway adventure with you. Okay, so if we can just hit the next slide and I'll hit the ground running. So I work at the Dearborn STEM Academy. It is a 6 through 12 public open enrollment school in Boston Public Schools in Roxbury. We currently have 3 designated pathways. We did 3 pathways in 3 years, and we are wall to wall. So we have pathways in computer science, which was our first, engineering advanced manufacturing, which was our second, and health science, which was our third. We can do next slide, please. So our pathway vision is that we offer interdisciplinary career pathways and early college courses to every student at the Dearborn. And this is in order to prepare students for both college and career readiness and success. Our goal is to ensure that all of our graduates can successfully access stable careers with advanced opportunities that pay a family-sustaining wage. We focus specifically on STEM careers aligned to Boston's rich STEM industries and aligned to the labor market demand for the next 5 to 10 years. So we had sort of a vision on what we wanted, and we went obviously with the DESE design principles, but some of the principles that are near and dear to us is that we opted to have an integrated interdisciplinary curriculum for all 3 pathways. So the units are connected, they have authentic shared performance tasks at the end of each unit. So that way we have anywhere from 3 to 4 teachers invested in the particular pathway curriculum at any given time. We focus on teamwork and positive identity. So students are regularly working in teams. It's something that they need to do after graduation. So we get them started early. And we realize that this has created a really positive identity for students inside the school. They feel like they belong to a smaller learning community and group. We have extensive career connections, guest speakers, field trips, career panels, work-based learning opportunities. We partner with the PIC sort of as our mass hire board, and we have a variety of different industry partnerships that we regularly lean on in the community. We've taken grade level leadership teams, content teams, and student support teams and sort of made them one team. And each pathway has a teacher team that holistically looks at the group of students that they serve. And of course, our ultimate goal is that our graduates are on a path to a family sustaining wage. Our goal is within 6 years of graduation. So sort of our early planning. So each pathway was lucky enough to receive a planning grant from DESE. And this included stipends for summer work. So all of our pathway teachers opted into doing summer work in curriculum. We made sure industry partners were involved from the beginning. So they were involved in every aspect of our planning, from what sort of career experiences students would have to the type of curriculum and performance assessments they would do in their regular classes. There is a ton of teacher learning and growth that comes along with this. I will say, and you'll hear me say it more than once, pathway work is hard work, but it is 100% worth it, especially the outcomes that it has for students. And depending on the pathways that you choose and the model that you choose, recruitment can be a little bit tricky, but that could definitely be overcome. But once all of our pathways was launched, there was super high interest. Students are your best sellers for anything. And now we're wall to wall, and it's fantastic. So what really worked? Interdisciplinary curriculum really worked. It showed kids the transferability of things from English class to computer science class to their history class. So it was really important that students saw that this was something that was comprehensive and not just in a silo in just their computer science class. Every unit has an authentic task or project linked to it that has some real world transferability. We had that regular interaction with industry partners. They help us build our assessments. They help us make sure that the skills that students are learning are aligned to what industry standards are there, and so that they're prepared for work right after high school, if that's what they choose to do. Incredible culture and identity. We were really lucky, not lucky, pandemic, not lucky, but lucky in the sense that we launched the computer science pathway before the pandemic. Those students had incredible attendance rates throughout the pandemic because they had already built a classroom culture that really kept them coming back despite some of the hiccups that the pandemic caused in education. So we were really lucky. We have early college pathway aligned opportunities for our students. So we work with Wentworth, we work with Bunker Hill Community College and Roxbury Community College. So students have a variety of different pathways towards advanced coursework. And we were very lucky between state funding and some private funding to really have students' choice built in. So we have a capstone project that students can engage in, and they were able to access materials and have a variety of different things provided for them because of that funding. What didn't work? I will say, if you don't have teachers invested, don't force it. Skeptical teachers that might not be ready for pathway work or interdisciplinary work, they can really slow things down. Internships in a pandemic definitely didn't really work for our students. And then I would say integrate MyCap, don't do it in a silo, because that really just makes it not feel super purposeful for students. Next slide, and I think it's the last slide. So important lessons we learned. Make sure industry partners are involved in all aspects of your development. They are your best friend, and ours are incredibly generous with both their time and energy. And we're super thankful for that. Only onboard teachers that are 100% invested in your philosophy, mission, and your pathway. Don't force it. It's really hard for teachers. We do interdisciplinary, so it's even harder because there's a level of peer accountability, a level of integration that a lot of teachers, when they signed up for teaching, just didn't sign up for. So I would say in your choices of teachers, really get those that are interested, invested, excited about doing this work. Integrate MyCap into all aspects of your pathway. Get your teachers on board. It's not just a guidance thing. If you have it involved in your curriculum and students are doing it and seeing it match purposefully with the authentic task they're doing, they invest. And so they get more excited about it. Spend time and money and working with your teachers to develop their own curriculum. if they write it, they will own it. And it's super important because you want them to own it and be excited about it. Provide teacher learning opportunities. We all know, especially in the technical subjects, it can be really hard to find teachers. So if you can find ways to grow your own, that can be super helpful. You can do this through teacher externships. Most of your partners are interested in educating your educators, and they'll see purpose in that, and they can get behind it. Provide true collaborating learning environment for students and teachers. So kids are collaborating, teachers are collaborating. It changes your learning environment in a way that's really incredible. And the one thing I've said before, and I'll say it again, pathway work is hard. If you're leading this work, nurture a growth mindset with your staff and your students, especially your staff. If they know that they can make mistakes and recover and build and do better, my teacher's always talking, okay, in 2.0, we're going to do, in 3.0, we're going to do. If you have that growth mindset, teachers, when they're uncomfortable, will feel less vulnerable and will work with you, and they'll grow, and you'll build some pretty incredible experiences for students. So I will stop there. Thank you for listening, and I will hand it off to our next presenter.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kristen. And thank you to all of you that have been putting questions in the chat along the way. We're going to hold on to them. Like I said, if we get time at the end of this panel, we'll ask those questions there. If not, don't worry, we're going to have more opportunity for whole group Q&A at the end. So we will pass the mic now to Mallory, please.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and Kristen did a phenomenal job of sort of taking us through just the groundwork. And like she said, it really is hard work. It is day in and day out. And I kind of go to bed at night thinking about pathways, and I wake up in the morning and I'm writing things down as soon as I get out of bed, or recording them on my phone. And so I think once you really immerse yourself in pathways work, you will start to be ignited with ideas and with thoughts and strategies about how to make them more successful, more fluid, and more accessible to all students. And so really today, I just have 4 kind of takeaways that I think are important in the development of your innovation pathway process. And the first one I would say is to start with the end in mind. And at the end of each student's individual innovation pathway program journey, what would you like to help them achieve? I think that's one of the essential questions. You know, for us, it was creating a space for students to discuss their ideas and their aspirations on a regular basis to help both them and us achieve our goals. And building that one-on-one support time is essential to the success of the student and the program itself, whatever industry you're building your program in. And especially when students are not familiar with this type of program and or the structure of high school. For us, we do most of our recruiting in 8th grade. And so they are new to innovation pathway programming and new to high school. And I think it's important to know that each student will have their own journey, and it's your job to help them carve out a path within the framework of your specific innovation pathway. And we learned over time that this isn't a cookie cutter approach, although that's how we like it to be, so that everything fits nice and neatly into our pathways box, but it's not always what's best for the student. So although you'll build a framework, it will most definitely need to be adjusted and revisited to accommodate the students' interests and their goals. In our initial phase of planning, I think we had determined that, you know, HIP courses or healthcare innovation pathway courses would only be offered during the elective block. And that would mean that a student that was interested in both, say, music and healthcare would have to make a decision between 2 strong interests. And in year 2 of programming, I just decided that we need to develop these academic roadmaps to plan out potential student profiles that had presented scheduling or course conflict challenges to help us continue to reach students that had multiple passions or interests, or students that needed academic support blocks in conjunction with their healthcare electives. These roadmaps helped both the students and counselors in the course selection and mapping process. And it reduces the risk of surprises along the way that the student or the counselor didn't plan for. And I can't stress that enough with the Innovation Pathway program requirements. The second thing I think is having a central point person, such as a program director, is integral to the initial and continued success of programming. It is very difficult to work in and work on programming for the present and the future. And having that central point person for both students and staff to come to discuss ideas, to talk about their academic and career and life planning, to talk about experiences that may be extended to the program, having someone, like I said, to think about that day in and day out, and to be a part of all of these different pathway programs helps to ground the work that you are doing. We have our guidance department here that knows about innovation pathways programs, but if someone really wants to get into the nitty-gritty of the programs here, they are sent to me, and they know that I will be able to point them in the right direction and sort of give that guidance about whether or not a pathway program is the right fit for them. The next thing I would say is having a marketing plan with tools that are intended to reach your target populations of pathway programs are really important. Know that most kids will not understand most programming, and that we're in the business of developing interest as well as facilitating those who have a stated interest in the program. Having marketing materials such as program one sheets, videos, and information sessions that are designed at the student level are so important to this process. And I think because we started off with healthcare, most students have a point of reference being there around 13 or 14 years of going to the doctors at a minimum for an annual physical. They are familiar with the healthcare field. In some industries they're just not as familiar with, and we can't use our point of reference as a determinant of what students know and don't know. So I would say those are my biggest takeaways and lessons from building an innovation pathway program. And I look forward to, meeting with you guys in the breakout rooms to kind of talk about your individual questions, because there's just so much that comes up. We can possibly get it all in 4 or 5 minutes. But certainly I think we're all here as a resource and available to just kind of talk about what worked and what didn't work. And I think we can largely talk about what won't work too, just from all of the challenges of starting a program and running a program through a pandemic, which is probably the most, the biggest thing that took us off guard. I don't think we ever expected to be running innovation pathway programs during the pandemic, but I think it's all a lesson learned for us to expect the unexpected. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Mallory, for sharing all of that. And I think in particular lessons around sort of what you're thinking in designing principles, starting with the end in mind and really knowing your students and what's a point of reference for them. Thank you so much. All right, so last but certainly not least, we are going to pass the mic to Meredith, who's going to spend a few minutes sharing about her experiences.
Thank you so much. So my name is Meredith Cargill Erickson, and I'm representing Carver Public Schools down in beautiful Cranberry Country, and was super flattered to be asked to participate in this panel today because we are definitely the neophytes in the group. So even being here and hearing Kristen's account and Mallory's account, and I've interfaced with them before through our new applicant professional learning communities, I learned so much from them each time. So I just want to appreciate the fact that they come to the table with a lot of experience. Unlike them, we are brand new to the process. We recently were awarded designation and will begin in August. But right now we're in the process of enrolling students and wrapping up our big campaign that we've provided for families so that they understand what Innovation Pathways is all about. And we're also in the same boat as a lot of you, where we're going to be applying for a second pathway designation and now maybe a third. And so I'll share a little bit about the learning energy that we've experienced through this process. So the pathway that was just designated for us was the advanced manufacturing piece. And this year we launched something called a MET pathway. And the MET pathway is really manufacturing, engineering, and technology. And this is brand new to our school. And it's really meant to provide students with, again, broad industry experiences and understandings that can provide them opportunities for college or career readiness in a lot of different areas. And then we want to make sure to emphasize for students and for parents that problem solving, teamwork, making things to solve problems, and technical writing, CAM and CAD, career readiness, that's all enveloped throughout the pathway and is scaffolded through the progression. So we wanted to make sure that parents understood kind of the shift in pedagogy that accompanies this pathway. And I'm sorry, I grew up in the 80s. And so being able to like move the film strip was the like greatest opportunity in each classroom. So if I go, bring, it just means if you want to click to the next piece, that would be great. So in terms of planning and early implementation, I was in your shoes last year at the same time. I am central office. So over the summer, as we were trying to negotiate and plan our return and that sort of thing, we really took advantage of the opportunity to get some positive feedback from the team of teachers that were involved in the planning and early implementation. And because it was a year unlike any other, I promised that I would write the grant and kind of shepherd people through the process if they could come to the table with their, true selves, and that they could bring their concerns and their excitement. So in that bar of orange, about 3/4 of the way down, we built off of the communities of practice framework and really asked people to come together jointly and to mutually engage and to develop this grant and kind of expand our toolbox. And just to give a little bit of background, we've suffered about 12 years of consistent budget cuts. In Carver, I've been here for 9 of those 12. And one of the biggest hits that we've taken is we redacted a lot of the elective opportunities for our students and became very traditional in terms of what we offered. And my superintendent and I attended something through the superintendent's organization about 4 or 5 years ago that really spoke to both of us about rigor and relevance and the importance of really making learning work for all students. And one piece that we recognized that we suffered from is when we asked for student input or when we gave students the opportunity for voice and choice, it was usually around things like, the color of the graduation gown or something on the menu. And we tended to get the same type of students that would share input. So those were students that were already college bound. They may have like a 4.0 grade point average or they were involved in student council. And what we really wanted to do is solicit feedback from the students who felt like school wasn't working for them. So we analyzed data and looked at our post-secondary realities and found that 20 to 30% of our student body was unsure of what they were going to do when they graduated. And we felt like that was a real opportunity to use that as a springboard. And we actually coalesced the whole staff, 6 through 12, and talked about that and what are some potential solutions to making sure that learning is more relevant for these students. We wanted to capture the lived experiences of our students and use that to examine what best practices are out there. And that led us to DESE. We met with them and they told us about the innovation pathway, the early college pathway, and some of those pieces. So we developed a shared vision and really looked at how we could improve equity for all. We are a pretty homogenous community if you're looking just on the outside, but as you dig deeper and look at our diversity and all of the opportunities that has to offer, we recognize that we need our students to feel empowered and we need to explicitly design opportunities where they feel like their voice can be captured. So with that said, We made sure to adapt as we solicited feedback from stakeholders, and we wanted to continue to have the power to mid-course correct. So rather than saying, you know, we're turning in the first part of our grant application and it's going to be a static document, we look at it as a dynamic living entity that we continue to improve with influences from students, parents, Mass Hire, and our local manufacturing board. Likewise, we wanted to make sure that in terms of the whole staff, as we're shifting the culture, that we wanted to communicate early and often, and we wanted to intentionally over communicate. So that kind of planned redundancy to make sure that no one was caught off guard as we were making these shifts, and that people felt like they could be empowered even if they were not the manufacturing, engineering, and technology staff, that they had a stake in what those outcomes might be. I'm going to do the Tinkerbell bring. So they asked us to talk about the important lessons that we learned. And again, because we are getting ready to launch, I can share just our lived experiences of this last year. So as I mentioned, communicate early and communicate often. I meet weekly about pathways with my high school principal and my superintendent to make sure that the resources, the culture, and some of those infrastructure pieces are taken care of. Likewise, I frequently meet with our team that helped gather information and provide feedback and help structure the program. We wanted to make sure that we created room for this to be our focus. So actually, the hybrid model that we had earlier in the year provided Wednesday afternoon professional development, and teachers self-organized and would invite me into their meetings, and we would have some real philosophical discussions about how to make this work and how to improve. And then I put a copy of my application in Google Docs, and people had the opportunity to see the entire application, but then I color blocked it for different teams or different people and would get together, and it was kind of, again, a living entity, and I would meet with both that whole group and then individually as needed. And then one of the other pieces is within our Innovation Pathway professional learning community, I found a study buddy. So someone that was attending just like you are today, and he reached out to me, I reached out to him, and we decided that we would work on our applications together. And they certainly are not a mirrored experience. He's in a very different situation, different part of the state. But as we approached our application deadlines, we would get together through Zoom and just talk philosophically about, you know, what do you think this means? And really make sure that we were there for each other in terms of the 5 guiding principles, because we wanted to make sure that that was front and center for all of the work that we were doing. And he's a principal, so we were talking about, like, how do you do that within your building? How do you shift that culture so that, you know, equitable access is a key focal point of what, of what you're doing and what your work is and how you're building that. So, and we did that with all 5 of the guiding principles, which was great. And then the last component is to utilize the office hours. I would say that was a huge lesson learned for me last year. CCE and DESE got together and they gave us the opportunity to ask any question. There were no stupid questions, and so I asked a lot of them. And the toolkit that they shared earlier was a huge support for me and gave me the opportunity to go ahead and track our practice. And then the last piece, I know I mentioned the 5 guiding principles, but what's nice is that the net effect of talking about the 5 guiding principles has extended well beyond the MET pathway into the school and into a lot of the work that we're doing in other career pathways. So I believe that that is it for my presentation. And I, again, just want to thank everyone for the opportunity to come and chat.
Thank you so much, Meredith. So I'm very pleased to introduce our 3 students who are joining us today. We have Ajmine, Angel, and Shania. Ajmine comes to us as a grade 11 student from Haverhill who is part of the healthcare pathway. Angel is a 10th grade student at South High School in Worcester and is part of the IT pathway. And Shania is a 10th grade student at Burncoat High School in Worcester who is part of the healthcare pathway. We appreciate each of them being here very much, and you'll get a chance to hear specifically from one of those students. And again, they'll be available to all of us at the end of our breakouts as well. please. So just a couple of norms for when we are in breakout spaces together. We invite you to, we'll ask you to keep yourself muted while our students share about their pathway experience. And then when we jump into the Q&A, we invite you to unmute yourself. We also love to see your faces. We know it's a small icon, but it's really helpful for creating some connection, particularly when we're in the breakout room. So we'll invite you to share your video as well. In just a moment, Allison will be sharing out invitations to join breakout spaces, and we'll invite teams to be in that space until about 10:25, I believe it is, but we'll get a prompt letting us know when we'll be invited back to the main room. So I hope everybody enjoys their breakout experience, and we'll see everyone back here in just a little bit. Thank you so much. So again, questions for any of our educator panelists, questions for any of our students that joined us, or in addition, I should add, if you have any questions for Jennifer or the CCE team, technical questions about the application planning process, these minutes are yours to ask them. So feel free to throw your questions in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask them out loud as well.
I think Michelle from Framingham has a question.
Sure. Before we jump to Michelle, I'll just clarify that our last few minutes of the workshop we'll talk more specifics about timeline, dates, processes for the application, and a few sort of specifics around supports that are upcoming. So you've not missed that information. That will be in our last few minutes. And so with that, we'll jump to Michelle's question.
Thank you so much, everyone. This was really great. I just have more of a quick technical question, because I feel like we heard from three, I guess 4 from my end, because I also heard from a student in the breakout room, but there was talk about like having a point person, which is really helpful, but it sounds like there are, from what we've heard, there's been point people that are in central office, there's been point people that are in the administration, and I'm not necessarily sure where each of, like, I guess to talk a little bit about that in terms of schools and that structure, that would be helpful, I think. If that makes sense. I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, so I'm happy to start, and then I would invite any of our educator panelists or Jennifer to jump in. And so I think it's really dependent on what works best for your school context and the folks and capacity available in your school. So we have certain districts that have a district point person who sort of sits at the district office level. And so you know, we heard from Meredith earlier in our small group. We mentioned a few folks in like Worcester who are part of that district administration piece, and others have a point person at the school. And so it's really dependent on the capacity, what works for your school context, and what makes most sense. And that's different for different districts depending on size, capacity, roles, etc. And so it really varies. All that to say, it really varies based from district to district and school to school. But I invite any of our panelists or Jennifer Watkin to expand on any of that.
Yeah, I would say that over the course of this planning period, when we'll have our one-on-one intake sessions, we'll be engaging in PLCs, you can kind of feel that out, and you'll be building a team, obviously, to approach your designation application. So yeah, hopefully we can partner with you to help figure out what would work for your high school in its context.
So I think it was my second point that I said about building a central point person into your planning process. And the reason why I say that is anytime you're building something new, you want to have a face and a presence at the ground level. And I think that that's really been important for students. Especially when you get to full capacity of your program, which we are approaching that within the next year. So we'll have 80 to 100 students in the program. And that can be a little bit overwhelming, I think, for our guidance department and our teachers. And I think so some of the administrative work and the questions and filtering things from business and industry and parents has been really helpful, I think, to have a program director, which that's the role that I serve in, just so that it kind of takes the weight off of, you know, the day-to-day teaching responsibilities and, you know, the administrators that are doing different things in the school as well. Having that central point person, I think, largely for students to go to is is integral to the success. Because I think when questions are not answered, or when kids feel frustrated, or like they want to give up, I think it's really nice to have a person to walk in their office and who's known them from the beginning of their application process all the way until, you know, they're midway through the program to the end of the program. Just that familiar face, building relationship, that one-to-one support has really been helpful.
Great, seeing from Victoria and Drew, who are both the faces for their programs, having a director. Yeah, it is important to have a point person.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think, Kim, I think you have a question. Your breakout room sort of ended a little bit abruptly, so I'd love to invite you if you want to ask your question for everyone to hear.
There we go. Yeah, Shania had just started talking about her schedule a little bit and how it was different than a traditional non-pathway student. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that, and if anybody else has any input on kind of what that typical daily schedule looks like for a pathway student in comparison to non-pathways.
Yeah, so usually how the schedule would look like would be school, and then thankfully there was a little break to eat lunch and review your homework before you start the pathway. Then the pathway will start from, I think, 2 to 5:30, around there. And after that, then you could finish all your schoolwork and also your pathways work. Which is, don't get me wrong, it is no excuse to not do your school work, because we also have help here in the school if you need any help with homework or anything like that. So
Thank you so much, Shania. And I actually wonder if we can pass that same question, Angel and Ajmine, if you can speak about your experiences as well. That would be fantastic, about sort of what your daily student experience is like, and if you know how pathways specifically is different from students that aren't in a pathway at your school.
Angel, do you want to go first, or can I go first? Whatever you prefer.
You can go.
Okay, thank you. So for healthcare, we're very flexible in terms of classes. Our healthcare classes are 1 through 4, kind of like it's titled as such. And they're usually 1-period classes that happen for the whole year, with the exception of junior year, because we're getting our CNA certifications that year. So it's a 2-period class. Other than that, we're expected to take anatomy and physiology. And outside of that, there's not much that you have to do in order to pass this program. However, being in this program does allow you to have opportunities that you would not have otherwise, such as kind of direct access to internship opportunities, direct access to clinicals at our local nursing home, and just kind of direct support from people who are actually passionate about the medical field, helping you out with your own applications and your own knowledge upon this field. Angel?
Yes, thank you. So for innovation pathways, it would start at 2:15 to add on to what Shania was saying. And it's a program we have to be very committed to do. Because there's also assignments, and sometimes there's homework depending on which innovation pathways program you're in. But yeah, that was my experience with it. I really enjoyed it, and it was very fun. And I had to balance out my schoolwork and my innovation pathways work.
Excellent, thank you so much. I know that as Kelly previewed, we're going to have some time to talk through a few technical aspects. So if you do have additional questions that are surfacing for you, I invite you to put them in the chat right now. You can use the app feature if you want to ask a particular student or a teacher as well. But for now, I'm going to turn the mic over to Callie. Actually, before I do that, I would love to offer one final form of appreciation for our educators and our students. Thank you so much for each of your individual presentations and for being available all of today to answer questions for us. So thank you to all of you. And now, Callie, I'll pass it over to you.
Great, thank you so much. I do know we had a couple people who had their hand raised, and I'm so sorry we weren't able to get to you. So please make sure to put those questions in the chat. If our guest presenters are able to answer in the chat, that's great. If not, we'll make sure to communicate with you after today to make sure to get those questions answered. So we've got just a few minutes left, so thanks for hanging around and sticking till the end. So in the last few slides, we really want to make sure to share with you some specifics around the application process and applying for designation in the upcoming school year. So this graphic you see shares an overview of the timeline for applying for designation in the upcoming school year, and that's a two-part application process that you see reflected here. So the Innovation Pathways Planning Grant and Part A applications are currently posted on the DESE website and available online in that link listed at the bottom of the page here. I also believe one of my colleagues is sharing that in the chat. And so all applicants are eligible to apply for a planning grant of up to $25,000 for program, or up to $30,000 if you're intending to apply for 2 or more designations in an industry sector, or to designations across industry sectors. So this planning grant is intended to help support your planning and development processes as you complete and submit your Part A and B applications. So those planning grants are intended for those who are applying in the upcoming year, so in the fall, and they're due on June 24th, so in just a short amount of time from now, a few weeks. Over the summer, CCE and DESE will be providing technical assistance in the form of office hours and virtual check-ins. And then technical assistance events will continue through the upcoming school year. So we'll have those, as we mentioned, in the form of professional learning communities, webinars, additional workshops, site visits if we're able to get in person. If not, we use a program spotlight feature to do virtual visits or cover topics. So those will be coming, and while we don't have a schedule yet, we will be communicating with you about those events when they're scheduled and when we know what topics they'll be. Part A applications are due this fall on October 29th. Successful Part A applicants will be invited to apply for Part B, and those Part B applications are due in February 10th of 2022. With all of the designations to apply this year, the final decisions are conferred in spring of 2022. So schools who receive designation this year, so this upcoming school year, are expected to begin enrolling students in their pathway program in the fall of 22. So as mentioned, it's a two-part application process that's structured around those 5 guiding principles that we've mentioned throughout the workshop today. So the preliminary Part A application, again, due October 29th. After submission, Part A applications will be reviewed by DESE staff, and then successful Part A applicants will be invited to submit Part B. And then those Part B applications are due on February 10th. So all those applications are submitted electronically, and those instructions are embedded within the applications themselves. The guiding principles and core characteristics that we discussed earlier in the workshop are the basis for the application questions and each component. And it's expected that the application is a joint application or partnership between the school, your district, and your local workforce board, so your Mass Hire board and an employer. So the DESE team has a staff, a group of folks who review applications when they come in, both the Part A and the Part B, and then the recommendations are then shared with the Education Commissioner. Ultimately, Commissioner Riley will be making final determinations for Innovation Pathway designation. A few things to note: if you receive designation, or when you receive designation, there are several post-designation commitments. Programs that are awarded designation this year will be required to schedule students in spring of 2022 to launch the program in fall of 2022. Designation terms last 5 years, and during that time, program leads or the point person are responsible for annual reporting, meeting performance metrics, participating or hosting site visits as appropriate and are able to be in person, and then participating in review after 3 years of initial designation. And as a member of the Innovation Pathways community of practice, there's ongoing support and technical assistance that's available in their regular convenings that we've talked about that are hosted by CCE in partnership with DESE. A couple of quick notes on financial support. So we reference a planning grant that's available to support your Part A and B application planning. It's a competitive RFP process that awards up to $25,000 for those developing a single pathway program and $30,000 for those proposing 2 or more programs. And again, that planning grant application is available now and due at the end of June, June 24th. In the past, there have been implementation grants available for new designees. So once awarded designation, amount of funding is available. We're still not sure if the funding will be available for new programs in the upcoming year, but we'll certainly keep you informed if those funds become available. And finally, Innovation Pathways designees are eligible for a capital skills grant for technology and equipment related expenses for their pathway program. And how will we help you and how do we be here in those beginning stages? So we are here to support you and we want to get you to yes. So we want to get your applications conferred and get students enrolled in your program. So we have office hours, virtual check-ins that are happening this summer. We'll have design institutes in the fall and throughout the school year. We'll set up PLCs among applicant groups. So you'll get to meet with other folks who are existing designees as well as folks who are new to the process. We're planning webinars and site visits and more to support your implementation. So in the coming weeks, we'll be reaching out to you to see how things are going. We'll schedule a check-in to learn how we can specifically be supportive and helpful to your planning and your design process. So keep an eye out for email that comes from us. We also, once again, want to share these 2 links about resources. So we shared a lot of information in a short time this morning. And so we encourage you to check out the websites. So the first link you see here is the DESE website, which includes all of the application and criteria information. And then the second link, that tiny URL, is the Innovation Pathways Community of Practice URL. And so that will take you to past event materials. You'll be able to register for upcoming events. It has all of the toolkit information. It can all be accessed from that particular website. And so in our last few minutes, we would invite you to take a quick 2 minutes, a very brief survey about your experience today. And I'll ask one of my colleagues to pop that link into the chat to make it easier for folks to access. So we value your perspective and the usefulness of these workshops. And we really do look at each and every one of the responses to help us design technical assistance events in the future. So please open that link and let us know how today's workshop went for you. We invite you to open that link. If you're not able to complete it right now, keep it open and come back to it before the end of the day. But if you're able to fill it out, we appreciate it very much for sharing that information with us this morning. So I'll give you a second to be able to access that link and open it so that it's open on your browser as a reminder to fill that out for the end of the day. And then finally, a thank you. Thank you so much for participating today. We know that there are so many competing priorities for you in this moment, and we appreciate you spending your time with us. Our team really looks forward to getting to know you and working with you over the coming months and in the coming year. I want to give a special thanks to our guest presenters, to Ajmine, Angel, Shania, Kristen, Mallory, and Meredith. Thank you for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us today. It was excellent and brings a perspective that we as CCE members and as DESE members just can't bring to the table. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience. And to all of our participants, good luck as we wrap up the end of an unprecedented school year. We're looking forward to getting to know you and meeting with you, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much, everyone.